Hello, everyone, and welcome to our lecture today. We're going to do something a little bit different today, which is that I have a class that I'm going to be teaching 2 weeks from today on September 14th, which is a spiritual psychic development class that's really going to focus on professional spirituality, professional psychics, professional mysticism, but it can really be taken by anybody to just understand a very deep look at psychic ability and psychic work and all that kind of stuff. So that is going to be taking place 2 weeks from today on September 14th. So what we're going to be doing here today is like a primer or an introduction, kind of a warm up to that. And so the title today is The Three Pillars of Psychic Work. And we're going to go over three very important things that any person needs to understand when it comes to developing their intuition, but also, especially if they want to go out into the public and make this a career, or just do this in a direct service capacity, because there's a difference between just kind of developing your intuition in your personal life and then stepping onto the world stage or stepping into taking on clients, or it doesn't even have to be direct, readings. It can be just doing anything spiritual. So having any spiritual work or having a spiritual approach to your work, this is what is going to be great for that. So before we get into exactly what the three pillars are, we are going to nail down exactly what spiritual work is, professional spiritual work is, and it is service. So if you're going out into the world and you're talking about the soul and the spirit and spiritual beings, that is a service. It is really a selfless service, and there's no way around that. So a lot of the times today in the social media era, especially in the last, I would say 10 or 15 years, psychic work and spiritual conversations have become commodified. So it's like people think, well, I want to be an influencer, or I want to make a lot of money, or I want to be famous. And I know that I can do that on social media now, but I don't know what to do. And I kind of like spirituality. So I'm just going to start up a TikTok account or an Instagram account or YouTube, and I'm going to use spirituality as my vehicle to be rich, to be popular, to be famous. That is a horrible idea, because mysticism, spiritual work, is completely different than any kind of career in existence. And that is because you are actually communing with spiritual beings. And this has an effect on your consciousness and your life in ways that we will talk about today, but in massive ways. So when you become a working psychic, or you have the spiritual approach to whatever work you do, it could be spiritual psychology. It could be, you could be an artist that does spiritual artwork. It doesn't have to be just straight psychic work. It can be doing anything in a spiritual fashion. When you do that, you really step into another level of functioning, okay? And the real reason why we're starting out with this one point is that it's actually not really safe for anyone to go out into the world and present themselves as a spiritual teacher and start working with spiritual forces unless they have a specific attunement. So we really have to have the right attunement in order to be magnified like that. Okay, otherwise you can open yourself up to things that you wouldn't normally be affected by had you not stepped forward as a spiritual teacher. Okay. So the three pillars that we're going to focus on today are going to be the principle of magnification, the principle of sacrifice, and the principle of immersion or disturbance. Now, these are three very important pillars that any person that wants to go into spiritual work in a professional spiritual life needs to recognize, consider, and have solutions for. So these are the three principles that you have to consider and have solutions for before you step on to being a professional spiritual person in whatever way you are. Okay, so in a sense, this is actually an attempt to de-influence you. This is kind of like more of a de-influencing broadcast, if anything. And then if you're still interested after this, then we can move forward. Okay. The first principle is the principle of magnification. So when you open yourself to the spiritual world, what's actually happening physiologically is your astral body is becoming amplified. It's becoming aggrandized. It's becoming, you could say, magnified. So everything, every thought that you think, every feeling that you have, every trauma, every joy, all of that is held within your astral body or reflected in your astral body. Now, I have a course on the four bodies on my website. It's free for members. So if you have a membership or you sign up for a membership, you get that entire course for free. And it describes the astral body, the etheric body. So that will be demystified, and you can take that before the course that's coming out on Sunday as just part of your membership. So when you make a spiritual connection, what's happening is everything that's going on inside of your astral body is becoming magnified. It becomes more intense. Everything you feel becomes more intense. Everything you think becomes more intense. Why? Because the actual mechanism of psychic connection is that the Holy Spirit or your guardian angel, what happens is those entities begin to pull into your body. And they pull into your body through your astral body and then through your etheric body, and they cycle through your physical body. These very high spiritual beings enmesh with you. And what happens is that now you, as a psychic, are responsible for being a medium or a bridge between the Holy Spirit and your guardian angel and the world. So you have to average that out with your essence, with your consciousness. What ends up happening in that averaging out is that all of your trauma comes up for on and off, probably throughout your whole life, but you really notice it when you're beginning to take a serious role in developing your intuition. Now, you'll even notice this when you start to walk down a more spiritual path, because to walk on a spiritual path is the same process as a mystic. It's just that a mystic is doing that to a much more intense degree than the average person. That's all. But you will experience this even on your spiritual journey. You'll experience this magnification of all of your pain, of all of your trauma. But because nobody is all bad, nobody is just a sack of trauma, you're also going to experience these glimpses of your true self, of who you truly are. And your real talents will also start coming to the forefront. And so there is this very significant kind of sometimes yo-yoing. There's this very significant back and forth between having to confront trauma and also, seeing who you truly are. And it really is Christ and the Holy Spirit that is flowing within you, that is reflecting who you truly are within you as you work. And you're being called to release these lower things, these lower impulses, these lower habits that, these aspects of yourself that you really aren't, whatever lies you're living. You're going to be called to release that the more and more and more you do this. Okay, and this is why a lot of people will start out practicing professionally in the spiritual world, and then they quit after a decade or less, is because people think that psychic ability is like an accessory, and it's not. It is a lifelong way of being that is very intense. Okay? So when you are doing this work, your emotions intensify. You feel things, you begin to feel things much more deeply. You become more empathic. Your thoughts intensify. So you really begin to see your ideologies, what your cosmology is. You get this, stark look at what it is you believe. Whereas if you're not doing all of the spiritual development, you may not even be called to examine what you really think about things. You may not even realize what your positions are. So when you enter into the spiritual field, those become more and more obvious, and also whether or not they are truthful becomes more and more obvious. So what's true in your life becomes more obvious to you, and also your darkness becomes more obvious to you. So the dark gets darker, the light gets lighter. Also, that means that you're changing. That means that your personality is changing. When everything in your life becomes magnified, you're going to change. You're not going to be the same person that you were 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and you'll change rapidly. And your family and your friends, they may not understand who this person is. And so you'll also get social pressure, family pressure to maybe become that person that they know you to be before you've had your spiritual awakening, before you've taken on a mantle of spiritual service. And so you'll have to deal with the fact that you're not the same person anymore, and that your relationships won't be the same anymore. Now, the individuals that are truly important in your life and that are there for you, and there isn't some kind of unhealthy thing going on, those relationships will deepen. And you'll also have new relationships come in that represent who you truly are. And so you have to expect this kind of shuffling around of your social scene and even family relationships, whatever that is, as you take on the responsibility of being who you truly are. Because in order to be a working mystic, to work in the spiritual field at all, you have to be genuine. You have to be who you truly are. You cannot lie to yourself and say, well, I'm going to be one person front facing and another person behind the scenes just so I can take from people or take from the world. That will hurt you if you try to do psychic work like that. And I think we can all think about different people who probably ended up, for whatever reason, taking that path. And it didn't end very well when selfishness is applied to mysticism. So another thing that can happen because of this principle of magnification is that your body can also, you can get old aches and old pains that come back, and whatever is going on in your body that is imbalanced will come forward in a much more intense way, because again, these very high spiritual beings are now in working through you And their energy is actually passing through your physical body. It goes through the astral body to the etheric body, into the nervous system, and into the waters of the body, and into the bone. So wherever you have some kind of pain or trauma, or where there's a presence of darkness, that is going to cause the body to hurt. So everything, even in a physical sense with health things, can also become magnified, because spiritual energy is a magnifier. In order to progress in your life and in your work, you have to become more and more like your angel, more and more like Christ, more and more like these exalted figures. And you cannot be stagnant. You have to become more and more like them, and they will work further to raise you. So your own service in the world is also your own initiation process with your angel and with Christ. So it necessitates your own development, and your own capacities necessitate you becoming closer to Christ and closer to your angel. Now, obviously, there's another path that can come about where you can get into, you could say, a dark relationship with lower entities, with demonic entities. And you can have a certain kind of psychic sight. It won't be creative. It's a different kind of psychic perception when you work with a demonic plane. But you can make that pact as well. But it will destroy your consciousness over time. It will darken your life. Okay? And if you sort of get to this point where you get to this sticking spot where you're spiritually developing and everything's going well, and then you get to this really challenging time and you just can't drop the ego, you just can't drop your lower ego, and you just cling to it, what can happen is that you'll experience blind spots. You'll experience psychosis, you'll experience burnout, and you'll experience problems. So when you refuse to surrender your ego, your lower ego, your selfishness, the longer that you do that when you are called to, means that you're going to develop some very big blind spots. There's things in the spiritual world you just will not be able to perceive because you're too selfish. You're clinging too much to the material world, and you're clinging too much to an idea of yourself, or you're too attached to, your conceptions of who you need to be rather than who you really are. And that's what causes blind spots. That's what causes over time also psychosis and madness, is this insistence on going into the spiritual world or spiritual forces and engaging with them, but refusing to surrender your lower self at the threshold. That's what causes these bizarre readings and this bizarre stuff going on. It's the poor attunement. So, there's different, as I mentioned, there's two different paths you can go. One is proper attunement that leads to your evolution and you having clear sight, and then there's the darker path where you can go to that doesn't require you to surrender your ego. Demonic entities actually tell you that you're so wonderful, you're so great, we have all this fame or money for you. But then you won't get actual genuine psychic information. You'll only get false light or recycled information from the lower astral plane. And quite frankly, ChatGPT can probably already do that anyway. A lot of this regurgitation of stuff we already know is already happening through computers. But it's that real creative ability to bring forward information for the time can only come through the attunement to Christ and the Holy Spirit and your angel, which is within that purview. So that attunement has to be there in order to evolve properly and in order to be protected. But there are ways that people can appear psychic or have very low level psychic abilities by going through the lower planes and sort of sharing, you could say, false light information. But it's tricky because there can still be psychic processes in there. You can still get predictions, you can still do things like that. It's just at a much lower level. Okay. All right. So when you venture into the spiritual world, especially if you choose it as a profession, you become subject to a magnification process. All the rhythms in your life can become more intense, and there is a pressure to increasingly attune oneself to higher ideals and ways of being. This is because psychic work is rooted in the enmeshment with the enmeshment of you with your angel, with the Holy Spirit, which means in order to receive psychic messages, you have to raise yourself and become like them. So your angel is not the Holy Spirit. Your angel is your guardian angel or your spirit guide that is the spiritual being that is responsible for your life, for all the aspects of your life that you may not be able to obviously control. There is a hierarchy of angels. Here it is here. And man is overlapped by angels and spiritual beings all the way up the hierarchy until the, Godhead. Now, it's very important that the spiritual hierarchies are actually understood because that really answers the question about spirit guides much more deeply. And it's not a simple conversation that we can have here. We will get more into that in my classes this fall, the idea of spirit guides, the different entities and things like that. But for our purpose here, your angel and the Holy Spirit, Christ, these are the entities that work through you when you are doing spiritual work, if you attune properly to them. So this attunement can obviously create intense purification and life changes that are unexpected. All of the impurities and lower impulses in your astral body become obvious. Over time, with the right efforts and attunement, the astral body does clarify, and it becomes a crystal clear body in which to receive and speak the Christ and Holy Spirit. So when you can actually get to a point through spiritual union where your astral body, actually becomes completely purified. It no longer has any lower impulses. It no longer has the sort of trauma in it that you started out with. And that is the definition of a clear channel, a clear vessel. You'll hear this sometimes in psychic development, at least good psychic development classes, where the teacher will say, you want to have a clear vessel. Well, you can't just be a clear vessel just from meditating for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or your entire life. To be a clear vessel, you actually have to transform the trauma and lower impulses that are within your astral body. So to become a clear vessel requires transformation. It requires the transformation of your astral body from cloudy and having traumas and wounds in it to eventually over time becoming clear. And the clearer the astral body is, the clearer the psychic, the clearer the information, the more accurate it is, and the more clear, the more clairs open up and are obvious. And there really is different degrees of psychic perception based on the clarity of the astral body. And these used to be the different degrees in mystery schools and spiritual development. Whereas nowadays, it's sort of like do this exercise to open the third eye, which is fine. Those exercises can be wonderful, but we really have to understand that having spiritual capacities is really the direct result of the purification of your astral body. Like it really depends on that process, which is the process of you going in and healing yourself. And it's not easy, it's not fun, but that is what creates that clear body, which allows your angel to work through you without any distortions, with minimal blind spots. Okay? Now, when you have a blind spot or you're not seeing something clearly, it doesn't always mean that like you have some trauma that you need to dig into to understand it. Sometimes information is held back from us due to overwhelmment or due to it not being time or due to or for other reasons. So sometimes when you are working, things can be held back from you, and it's for reasons of timing or reasons of the body not being able to handle it. There's other reasons why things can be held back that are not a blind spot. But blind spots really refer to having a crooked cosmology, especially. Like actually not understanding how the cosmos works is more like the blind spots that develop when the individual is not working on their structure. They can't see the cosmos clearly. And that is the kind of blind spots that happen when we're not working on ourselves. And it doesn't matter where you are in your psychic development journey or your career, you are always called to do this, the same as someone who's starting out day one. This is not something that you transcend, like I never need to do this anymore. This is the great stabilizer, the great equalizer that every single person has to do, no matter where you think you are in your practice. Okay? When an individual does not dedicate themselves to a moral life, and a moral cause, so they're not attuning themselves properly, they will experience burnout, ill health, and psychosis and these blind spots. This is because the lower impulses in the astral body were not purified and were over time repeatedly magnified instead through improper spiritual union. Okay. All right. So if you are interested in signing up for next Sunday, the link should be on the chat now, and it should also be in the description or appearing very shortly. But let's carry on to the second principle. So the second principle is the principle of sacrifice. Sacrifice. There is no psychic connection unless you make a sacrifice. Now, when you're first starting out, the sacrifice happens unconsciously. And you may not really realize you're doing it because we are in constant communion with our spiritual guides anyway. But then the more you go deeper and deeper into your abilities, you will be called to actually understand what is occurring within you when you're doing psychic work. So there's so many people who are psychic, but they could not explain to you how they are psychic. They could not explain their abilities to you. That's not really good enough, in my opinion. If you're going to be out there and you're going to be talking with people, you should have some idea of what you're actually going through. And this is not a statement of arrogance. This is for your own safety. And this is for you to actually understand how forces are working through you so you can adapt and make sure that it is healthy, right? So The principle of sacrifice is that in order for you to get spiritual information, to have a vision, to clairaudiently hear something, to claircognizantly get a download, a knowing, in order for you to have any of the clair alliances, the tasting, the smelling, the clairgustance, all of the different clairs to feel as an empath or clairsentience, all of the clairs, okay? All of that actually requires a piece of you, a piece of your essence to be transformed through your angel. Okay, so your essence, your body is actually going through a small direct transformation with your angel, which is above and beyond normal thought and normal basic intuitive processes for people who are not a practicing mystic. Okay, so when you are doing something spiritual in a big way, you're taking that on as your life, you are giving a part of your actual body, a part of your actual being, to be transformed into the body of your angel and into the higher planes from there. So how you get spiritual information is through this transubstantiation that goes on, this literal bridging of it actually takes your body to do that. So you can imagine it like a kind of mutual digestion that occurs between you and the spiritual world. It's like a sacrifice of your etheric body and even physical body to even get that going. Okay, so it's not like some process that happens in this imaginary way where there isn't a literal piece of you that is being transformed every time you do spiritual work. It has to be an exchange, and there's a sacrifice every single time of your essence. And this is why attunement was so important. Because we're talking about the substrate of your bodies that's being used here. And what are you digesting that into? The higher spiritual planes or the lower? Okay. So if you can imagine it, it's like imagine it like a limb being taken off briefly and dissolved into the astral plane, and then it reappearing in an actually different state than it was before. Okay, so you're doing psychic work. It's like your arm disappears. All right. And it comes back eventually, but it comes back in a different form, a more exalted form, or it comes back all funky and weird because your attunement wasn't proper. So other jobs don't require that. You know, this is different. This is a different kind of life, and it takes something from you and gives something back. You know, other jobs that are not in the spiritual field or individuals that are not engaging in spiritual life like this, they're not going to have that to that degree. Okay. Again, this is why sometimes over time, you'll have people be wonderful psychics or have wonderful, even dancers, even artists, even scientists. Whatever it is in your life, you can do spiritually. Like you can have an intense mystical process to whatever you do. There are mystical scientists whose scientific equations and inventions and things like this are completely inspired from the spiritual plane. That's their life purpose. You know, you can have mystical artists where everything that they do is from the spiritual process. That's basically what a mystic does when they're just giving information. But when you're not going through that, you're not experiencing the same degree of transformation also in your body. And we've probably seen these different spiritual people that start out good, they start out okay, but then as they progress in their life and they get older and older and older, there is an inability to attune properly and get into that depth in their personal life and their trauma. And that is what can cause actually a quicker degeneration of the body. And different things can go wrong faster than people who are not doing it, because there is this sort of transmigration of forces that go on. And if that doesn't happen well, then that can lead to a faster degeneration of the body and the mind and things like that. So there's that principle of magnification again with this principle of sacrifice. So the principle of sacrifice basically is that in order for you to get that inspiration, you have to give a piece of your actual self. Sacrifice is required for everyone throughout the day, of course, but when you do spiritual work, it is required to a much greater degree. Now, on the good side, if you are properly attuned and you are humble and you are willing to throw your lower ego and say, yeah, take that. I am a child. Okay. I am a child. Show me. If you can do that, that's where regeneration comes in. There's actually ways in which you can live your life where you age slower. And it has nothing to do with the Botoxes and the creams and whatever it is. It's actually how you cycle your energy in your body, period. So this can go both ways. If you're poorly attuned, if you're struggling with letting go of your ego, but you're still wanting to do all the spiritual stuff and whatever, captured in like demonic messages or whatever, that's going to wear your body down very quickly, because those are parasitic entities that are using your energy to feed themselves. Okay? If you can attune properly to your angel and the higher spiritual world, which is the body of Christ, then you can actually experience that renewal, that eternality. And that's actually how you really begin to build your immortal body. So the real task of mysticism really is to establish your immortal body through your work. There is actual renewal that occurs through the process if you can attune properly. It's not like you're going to like live forever or something, but I'm saying that it's a transubstantiation. It is a transformation that can go either way. And again, I see all the time on like TikTok or social media, people are just like, oh yeah, just psychic work or whatever. And it's like, this is what people need to know before they start, because a lot of people, if they hear it, they may be like, you know what, maybe no. Or I think I'm probably speaking to the choir here. I think a lot of you guys already know this, but it does help to lay it out before we go very deeply into different techniques, different esoteric knowledge. It's like this phase of de-influencing has to come out first before we can go any deeper, because people have to know what they're getting themselves into. So psychic work is not equivalent to motivational speaking necessarily, or even psychology. You can be a motivational speaker or like a psychologist or a therapist or like a life coach and not be involving any mystical processes, any deep spiritual processes. And more I see people thinking that like psychology is spiritual work, and it is not necessarily at all. There is spiritual psychology, and you can approach psychology from a spiritual way, but the mental plane is not the it's not an angel. It's not your process of spiritual development. It's part of it, but you can very easily lead a talk, lead a discussion, but actually not be engaging in it at all. And so when people start to develop their psychic abilities, so many people don't think that they're having a psychic experience or a spiritual experience because it is subtle. So when you're getting a message, a vision, a sound, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. What your guide, your angel, I'm going to use guide and angel as the same thing here. Your guide is going to animate your astral body and your consciousness. So when you get psychic information, it sounds like your own thoughts. It sounds like your voice. It feels like your own emotions. When you're around someone, for example, and you start getting psychic information about them, and they're going through grief and loss, you experience that as grief and loss. You experience that as its correlation in your life. When you get a creative idea from your angel, it seems like it's coming from your own mind. You know, when you get intuition, it seems like it's a thought that's rolling forward in your being. And this is why people don't think they're psychic, is because they think that psychic information comes from this place where it just like hits you in your head, that it's completely different than you. But because of the law of sacrifice, we know that it's actually our body, it's our being, it's our essence that is the medium for spirit. So it's our voice that we hear. It's our own thoughts that we receive spiritual information in. It's our own body in which we feel it. The spiritual world will not present to you, especially if you're just starting out, it will not present to you in a forward way. It's not going to rip you out of your environment to prove to you that it exists. God is not going to just prove to you that he exists. Neither are your angels or any of the spiritual world. Why? Why don't they do that? Because your ability to quite literally attune to them and become like them is the point. It is the point of us even being here. So why would they remove that from you and appear to you externally when the whole point is for you to turn inward, learn to sense them, and attune to them and become like them, and through that process, which is initiation, gain eternal life? So no, they're not going to prove to you that they exist. And all efforts in modern society to externalize spiritual communication through computers, through chatbots, through aliens and spaceships, all of that stuff is a way to get you externalizingly, repeatedly, and projecting yourself forever in the material world instead of doing the process of going inward, instead of doing this process. Turning inward and attuning and immortalizing yourself. Okay. So your intuition uses your thoughts, it uses your body, it uses your feelings. You are the medium, you are the vessel. So it uses everything that you've got. It uses that weird memory that you had from kindergarten when your pants fell down. That's a true story, by the way. That happened to me. It uses that when you're working with someone to, say that they had a weird kindergarten experience. That's how psychics work. That's how intuition works, is you experience in your body, in your mind, as part of you, and that becomes a message. Now, as you get better and better and better at that, and a lot of it is that you have to share it. A lot of it is like your intuition doesn't deepen, it doesn't sharpen unless you actually start to bring action to it. unless you start to share it, unless you start to work on it and bring it into the material world through your activities. You can't just like get an intuition and then let it die on the vine and ignore it. You're never going to have deeper spiritual insight when you're literally letting it die on the vine. It's like a pump, you have to get it going. All right. So the next thing is that you will get physically tired. You could get irritated. You could get angry, because when you do psychic work, you haven't moved a muscle necessarily, but you've run 5 marathons in your energy bodies. You have literally been operating through all of this stuff with your angel, and you're just black and blue, you know. And then you have to deal with the fact that you've basically run a marathon and you are exhausted, but you haven't moved a muscle. And this is because, again, the principle of sacrifice, which is that you are actually giving portions of your actual body, your actual essence, to spirit in order to do what you're doing. So if you have this weird, like controlling materialistic approach where you're super hard on yourself and you have to be, you know, there has to be like material proof of everything. There has to be all of this material validation, and you've got to like, it's just that emphasis on materiality. Sometimes it won't get up off the ground because you don't realize that you just ran 5 marathons psychically with your psychic work, and you need to rest. And it doesn't matter that your body didn't move today, you're exhausted. So a lot of really good psychics experience burnout because they don't give themselves enough grace to rest, because they think, well, I'm in balance because I haven't done enough with my physicality today. But you have to know that sometimes you're just going to have to rest because you've done so much in the spiritual world. Now, this is also where routine comes in. You know that you're running marathons every day in spirit, and that there's no material evidence of that necessarily. So you have to have a routine and a discipline where you move your body at certain times, where you shut it down, where you really seek that balance. And you'll have to have a very strict discipline and routine to find that balance, because you just can't let your physical body atrophy either. Right? So you have to find that balance, understanding that you're going to have certain days where you focus on physicality to keep that balanced. Also, when you're working with a client directly, now this is for practicing mediums and psychics. When you are working with a client, okay, what you're doing is you're actually triangulating. So you're quite literally the medium, and you're using your body and your consciousness to triangulate psychic information for your client. So you are going to enmesh with your client. Now, in the course coming up on next Sunday, we're going to get into kind of being open and closed and kind of the client, that kind of stuff. But suffice it to say for now, you're going to have to merge with your client. You will naturally merge with your client based on the intention that you're doing a reading for them, that you're working for them. So you're going to take on their stuff. You're not going to take on everything. You're not going to take on all of it. But you will take it on to a degree, especially if you have something in common. You have a similar wound that's going to come out as you're talking with them. So you're also going to pick up what your client is going through and what's going on in their life. This is why you can't do like 50 sessions in a day or something, is because you actually have to process that for them. This is what being a healer is. This is what being a psychic is, a mystic. Part of it is that you are that medium for your client and the spiritual world. And so you have to live out these things with them. Okay. Now, yes, there are different positions you have when working with a client that are observational and that are separate, but you're still enmeshing with them. There's different degrees of enmeshment, yes, but you're still going to be taking on what they are, and you will have to have a process for cleansing that energy. And they will also receive energy from you. This is why some psychic readings are very uplifting and you feel incredible. And it's not even about the information that you got. It's because that person was a very good psychic, a very good mystic, and you can feel it in your body because you enmeshed with them. But there's also different psychics that shouldn't be working. They don't have proper attunement, and your life can go very, very bad after working with one of these psychics that doesn't have the right attunement. And it's like an STD. It's like, you can get things from people that are impure intentions or that are not properly attuned because you're enmeshing with them because of this principle of sacrifice that binds. You can have a horrible week after a bad encounter with a healer, a Reiki practitioner, a spiritual person who does whatever it is. If they're not properly attuned, that can actually harm your energy body. Okay, so there is this enmeshment even with your client. This is why you have to really look into people who you are getting these services from, right? Yeah. See how the comments are out there. All right. Good. Some comments are coming in. I'm just going to close this 1 second section and then we'll go to your comments and see how you guys are doing out there. So you have to know that it's a very personal, intimate work. And even if you're not directly working with clients and you're teaching, you're enmeshing with the world. You're enmeshing with the world soul. You're purposefully enmeshing with the darkness of the world soul to come up with solutions. So psychic work requires this enmeshment with people, with the world. It requires this kind of intimacy, right? Which leads you to have to develop a very strong routine of exercise, physical exercise and movement to balance out all that spiritual activity, the marathons you're running. But then you also have to have different things set up in your life to support you and cleanse yourself because you're taking on all of this stuff from the world like a friggin' moth to a flame, and I talk to other psychics and teachers and they're like, yeah, like there's, sometimes you just get completely weighed down by certain things and you have to have different processes and you have to figure it out as you go, what works for you. But you absolutely have to figure that out because the worst thing is for you to be like a fantastic psychic, a fantastic whatever you are, and then to be like, God, I really hate my job because I just feel so bad after doing it for 3 or 4 years. I just feel terrible. And it's like, no, you can't let that talent die. You have to know that you're picking up on what your clients are thinking and feeling, and you're probably not cleansing it all, and now you're carrying it. Or you have to know, no, it's not you. You're picking up everything that's going on in the world, and you're carrying it. That's why you feel so terrible and overwhelmed. That's part of it. So when you know this, there's that little bit of separation that you can have, and you can create a life that totally supports your work, that totally supports your spiritual work when you know these dynamics. So when you are making a connection with spirit, you are using your body and you're using your spiritual bodies as the substrate that creates a bridge to spirit. You are the medium. So spiritual information doesn't just come into your body like bloop, it just fell in with no consequences, nothing going on. No, it's actually when you get spiritual information, it's because a part of your essence has been transformed into that information by a spiritual being. And that process has bound you closer to that spiritual being and either established your glorified astral body or not. Okay? Your essence is absorbed into your angel, passes through their body to the Christ, and then returns to you. Now, this process happens anyway throughout life, but when you're a mystic, when you're a spiritual worker, it happens to, again, a magnification, and it's a sacrifice that happens. This circuit demands your conscious evolution to participate. If you do not have a practice where you are doing self-healing and deep work, then this will be a painful process. And you may even be tempted to form unions with lower entities that don't require personal reflection or facing any trauma to work with. Forming a union with lower entities forms a circuit that it forms a lower circuit. And it's a different circuit than the one that is formed through Christ and the hierarchies. In these cases, short-term material success is granted, but the individual's consciousness becomes damaged, and eventually they will be discarded and often humiliated by lower beings. This is really important. So when you begin to go into this relationship with lower spiritual entities, demonic spiritual entities, they will be different than actual angels. Demonic spiritual entities will tell you that you're going to become rich, that you're going to become famous. They'll figure out what it is that you want, and they'll say, oh yeah, you can have that. Or it may not even be that, it may be something else, but they'll find out whatever is in your lower ego and they'll offer that to you. And it becomes a parasitic relationship where there isn't that higher transformation occurring. And again, there is a certain kind of predictive work you can do through that. And there is a certain kind of psychic vision that you can have, but it's not the same scope, spectrum, sphere as when you're working with the higher planes. Okay. And once you get into like a communion with lower entities, they'll basically kind of suck you dry, and then they'll often like humiliate you and then discard you. It's really sad to see that, but it sometimes can take decades, but that's ultimately what ends up happening. Is humiliation can be part of it, and inversionism, things like that. As you are the medium, the physical body and the mind can experience issues from poor attunement, and you will do poor quality work and experience blind spots and burnout over time. All blind spots that we have are lessons we have yet to learn. And every period of burnout denotes a period of honest integration and surrender, which is needed. Further, you have to regularly sacrifice things in your physical life that are not good for you. In order to continue this connection and go deeper and deeper, you have to give up things. You have to give up things that don't serve you. It may be relationships again. It may be ideas about yourself that aren't true. It may be these hopes and plans and dreams that you've created for your life that you think mean that you're successful, but were created out of complete materiality and a lower state of consciousness. But in order for you to go forward, you will have to increasingly give that up. It's like in the Eastern systems when they say you have to release attachment. The deeper you go into this, the more you have to do that. It's just required, especially as you get older. So you have to let go of mental paradigms that aren't reflective of God and relationships that are unhealthy and any attachments to materiality. And the astral body must be very pure to be used as a bridge. And your body, mind, and spirit is the medium for communication. And parts of your spiritual body undergo transformation in order to bridge into the spiritual world. So it really is a physical, mechanical thing as much as it is a spiritual thing. there actually is a transubstantiation that goes on. How are you guys doing out there? Hi, Jen P2776. Healing your wounds and traumas, dropping that density. Yeah, the thing is again, all of that stuff becomes more obvious and it's in the astral body and it's like a light being shined on it. But if you can confront it, then you're so much better off for it. Gianluca Calarala. I've been psychic since my childhood, so growing up I felt like an outsider. But now, as I'm in my late 20s, I see how much people truly need this love we carry. 100%. The reason why I'm starting out this course series with professional mystics is that we need you. We need people who are psychic. We need people who can see into the spiritual world more than ever, giving their gifts to the world. We need that so badly right now. We need lots of different fields to have psychics in them. Even if you're not classically doing readings or classically teaching, we still need psychics in every profession. That's what's going to get us through this incredible time of materialism, right? So, for a lot of people, they are naturally psychic and they're just working on understanding how they actually operate and how it actually works, because you won't get into a higher level of psychic work, in my opinion, unless you actually know how it operates in your body, like what your body's doing, what your energy bodies are doing. That's what allows you to get to, I think, a much more precise, deep level, is when you have the knowledge of how your capacities work, knowledge of the spiritual world too. If you have a solid cosmology and you understand what the spiritual world is, you're going to be so much better at your job. If you're just kind of sitting around and you're like, yeah, I have this gift, you're not going to have a whole lot of objectivity either. So part of it is natural, and then part of it is like you have to tweak that through the education. Like, it's like anything, right? There's a natural talent, but then it's the education, the study that takes that from like an unhewn marble to Michelangelo, right? Wade O'Donoghue, the best moments of life is when one's deeper self spikes to the surface. To have more real moments is the meaning of life. Yes. Graham Pong, beware of your Saturn returns, ages 29.5 and 59, which often trigger spiritual awakenings. Steiner went through a transition during his second Saturn return. Yes. So this is also why it's not recommended to be super, like, I would say, out there with things maybe until around the age of even 40, or when you're older, because by that time you cycled through a lot of your transits and you kind of know who you are. But usually around the age of 30, you do go through this time where you have to become retrospective and face a lot of your shadows through the Father Saturn energy. And so, yeah, that's a time when, that's a time when you gotta figure out who you are. Okay, Efficiency Alchemist. You and DJ are the best. Thank you. Incredible work. Yes, I have to say that DJ, Dark Journalist, is on fire with his channel right now. He just did a really incredible presentation on Friday talking about the incredible corruption that's going on and the Golden Dome and all the different operations behind what's like, kind of going behind all the drama in politics right now. So I really recommend going over there and checking that out. Marta, I'm loving this. Good. Brandy Dawn, my spiritual awakening happened too fast while I had been bedridden for 9 years from meningitis and Lyme, and I almost died from pulmonary embolism. I healed myself through years of meditation. Wow. That's a story that I've heard before, not your story, but it's like sometimes when you have nothing else to do and you feel like you're on death's door, it just gets you thinking differently and it's an awful experience, but sometimes you can use it to go deeper and deeper into spirit, and that's why that happens, is that it's the spiritual fruits that come from it, and sometimes not being able to use the physical body properly, in a weird way, it actually amplifies the spiritual bodies and psychic senses and stuff like that. Eridani, I unfortunately needed to hear this 3 or 4 years ago. Me too. So when I was first starting out, like 16 years ago, I would just use like basic psychic development books and like classes, but I never felt like I actually understood what I was doing. And there wasn't enough guardrails. And a lot of it was really fluffy. It was just kind of like fluff. Or it was just outsourcing a lot of operations and knowledge to the spiritual world, which I wouldn't recommend either. So yeah, I hope that, moving into the fall, if you guys do join me in these classes, I have based this around what I wish I would have had 15, 16 years ago. And so hopefully this has value to you, because this is also what I would have liked to know when I first started as well. I was all over the place, you guys. Like, I'm talking about myself here. Remember, yes, I have clients who want me to train them in mediumship, and I make sure they know this isn't for fun or even enjoyable. It's a huge responsibility. It takes more than development classes. It's devotionals every day, 100% member. So over on my website, people are watching this. My members are watching this and talking, and a lot of them are professional psychics over there. They're phenomenal. Yes, it's like whenever somebody says that, I try to de-influence them from it, because again, there is this sense that your psychic abilities are going to be like an accessory, and you're just going to be able to turn it on and turn it off. And it's actually a completely different way of living. It's a completely different way of life. And so you have to take it on very slowly, hopefully with somebody who is a good teacher, good mentor that can really show you what that attunement is. We need examples of what good attunement is. We can sit here and say, oh, attunement, Christ, but you have to have good examples of what that attunement actually looks like and feels like for it to become real. And so that's also why I'm here and why we're trying to have these conversations, is to parse it out logically, get the feeling right, and then you have the best possible, toolkit. You're never going to prevent your client, if you're teaching this, or you're never going to prevent your friend or anyone from having a bad experience they're meant to have happen. Their relationship with their guides and with God is primary. And there are experiences that they're going to need to have that you can't prevent them from having. And it's not your fault if you're a teacher that they have them either. This is their relationship with God and their spirit guides is the primary drive. All we can do as teachers and professional mystics is try to help them understand that and give them tools to understand that relationship and to become more and more independent and more individualized in their spiritual processes until hopefully they no longer need you. The goal is to teach people out of needing it at all. We all need it to a degree, but that's the goal. You're not trying to replace someone's spirit guide, so they need you all the time. You're not trying to replace someone's relationship with God and be there in between. Their relationship with God and their guides is always primary. It's always the thing that is encouraged, explained, that is where their depth is. And as a teacher, what we are doing, or as a mystic, whatever it is we're just trying to help them understand that if we can, through spiritual science, through different practices, different devotionals, through whatever we believe helps. But that's the dynamic. So yeah, it's different than the idea of a guru, actually, in a lot of senses. The idea of guru in the West, or the idea of like a modern teacher, is different than like in the Lemurian period or very early periods when you used to have teachers that would literally do things for you. Now we're in a different period where the independence and individuality of the student or of the client is the number one thing. It's very important that that dynamic is honored, because you don't want anybody to feel like, oh my God, I need this reading today or something, you know. They have to know that they're developing something with themselves every time they speak with you, every time they get a reading, every time they attend one of your lectures, that there's an internal process going on within them that is more important than anything I am saying or anything anyone is saying. And that's what they have to go into. Okay, member, I am going to be a mystical attorney, so this course is perfect for you. Well, we need mystical attorneys, okay? This is something that we need. We need that morality brought back into the system of law, and I love to hear that. And you 100% can use your intuition as a lawyer, as a doctor. I mean, I think that having psychic ability and having that brings the profession to where it should be. Attorneys should be mystics. Doctors should be psychics. Look at all the bizarre stuff that's going on in healthcare. Can you imagine if the doctors actually understood what the spiritual world was and the spiritual bodies are? Can you imagine attorneys like this member who are considering moral life, morality, and the spiritual consequences of what's going on? Every single job should be a psychic job. That is how we get the world that we want, is when we actually start to begin to interact with the spiritual planes consciously. And you can see that very closely in just the development of mysticism, but again, it is in every career. There should be intuitive dentists out there. We suffer when we go to these different people, these different professionals, and they don't even think the spiritual world exists. How can we get proper care if there's a massive part of our own being that isn't being accounted for? How are you ever going to go to heal from a psychologist if the psychologist isn't even sure that your spirit exists, when your spirit is literally the thing that heals you from anything anyway? You don't heal at all unless the spirit does so. So this is sort of where we are, which is why this information applies to everyone. It applies to every job, because every job is a job for a mystic, for a psychic. Okay. Sandy Song Joy, appreciate your work, Gigi. And last comment is Blue Sky. We would be great if you touch upon the NPCs, as most of the newly awakened ones must deal with them in physical life. I actually have spoken about NPCs in my lecture called Soulless Beings, and I'm wearing a gray blazer and green shirt. I did it in 2024 in the month of November or October. So I cover NPCs in detail for like 3 hours in that particular lecture. So on the 14th, what we're going to do is the first part of the course is going to be attunement in a psychological way and a spiritual way. And then the middle part of the course, we're going to talk about, practical advice on working with people. And then even for anyone that wants to practice as a mystic directly, pricing or clients and things like that. And then the final portion will be a generous Q&A session that we're going to do. We'll probably go for about 4 hours, and it's going to be very in-depth. All right. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe here right now, wherever you are watching me, and also sign up for my announcements letter, where I will shoot you an email only when I'm going to be doing something here or I'm releasing something. I'm not going to send you any spam. I'm not going to send you any like weird things in your email. It's literally just announcements. So sign up for that as well. And that allows me to send that out. And sometimes people don't get notifications. Sometimes people are unsubscribed from my social media accounts, unfortunately. So do consider signing up so that you cannot miss anything that we're doing over here. All right, we're going to get into the last principle. We've covered 2 so far. There's a principle of magnification, which is that when you begin to consciously work from a spiritual place, no matter what job you're doing, when you start to consciously involve spirit, your entire life becomes magnified and you become tasked with taking more and more responsibility for cleaning your life out and confronting your shadow. The second pillar that we're talking about is sacrifice. Whenever you begin to work directly with spirit, it's going to take sacrifice from you, literally in the reality that part of your body and even your spiritual bodies and physical body is being transformed every time you communicate with your angel, right? So the law of sacrifice is the law of mysticism. And you want to make sure you have good attunement, correct attunement, so that you purify your astral body as that transformation happens. So every time you do connect, it's a purification. With poor attunement, you're not just getting trapped with like weirdo entities in the lower planes and giving like stupid information out. It actually harms your body. It actually harms your consciousness, right? Because you're binding yourself, because it's a sacrifice, you're binding yourself with these entities. You're making yourself one with them, and it actually degenerates the body. I know this is a very harsh truth that a lot of the spiritual community is just not mature enough for. I'm sorry. I hear the weirdest stuff out there, but psychic work is sacrifice. Okay. Let's get to the final principle here. We'll go through that, and then I'll read a little bit of more of your comments, and then we're going to close it out for the day. So the final principle is the principle of immersion, or you could say disturbance. I would sometimes call it disturbance. And if you, I know a lot of you are psychics, and you're probably going to call it that as well. So when you enter into connecting with spirit and you're doing it consciously, and you're like, no, whatever I do in life, I'm going to do from a spiritual place. It's going to be conscious. You open yourself up to the spiritual world. So your focus and your perception is no longer going to be so oriented on the 3D material plane. What will happen is slowly over time, you're going to notice more and more spiritual beings. It's going to start out of the corner of your eye. It's going to start with like little flashes of light, orbs, things like that, because a spiritual being appears as an orb first, and then it materializes. So all this stuff about orbs, yeah, that's how spiritual beings appear, okay? So you're going to see it out of the corner of your eye. You're going to see it sort of in your subconscious mind. Your dream time is going to become more intense. And you're going to feel as though you are more and more immersed in the spiritual world. You're going to feel as though the material world is merging with the spiritual world. This is inevitable. You cannot prevent that from happening. You cannot prevent you saying, I want to be connected to spirit and I want to live a conscious life, but I want spirit when I want it. for what I want it for. When you start to work from spirit, you enter into a covenant of service, which means that spiritual world begins to enmesh with the physical world, and you have to be your highest self in the world no matter what. You have to be that spiritual force in the material world. And everything about the material world begins to shift and change and melt away, and the spiritual world becomes your guiding world. And you live in the material world, but you're not of it. And that is down to your perception, because you're going to begin to see over time spiritual beings. Now, you will be tested. So, a spiritual being, your angel, will begin to manifest to you in a more obvious way. If you freak out and you say, no, not ready for that one, and you freak out and you pee your pants or whatever because you're like, it's happening, whatever, you can't help it, because thinking about seeing an angel or thinking about seeing a demonic entity, thinking about seeing a spiritual being, and having that fantasy in your head is very different than actually encountering them. You don't know how it's going to feel and what it's going to bring forward until you actually experience it. And there's a learning curve with it where you have to encounter these things immersed in your world, and you have to come up with solutions, psychological solutions, and spiritual knowledge that actually allows that to happen, where it doesn't throw you off track, okay? So spiritual beings are going to perceive you more and become more interested in you, because now you're operating and contributing more directly to their world. And they're going to appear around you more. You're going to hear things more. Everybody has a different foray into the spiritual world. Some people it's seeing, some people it's feeling, some people it's hearing, some people it's just another deep knowing. But you're going to start to feel it, and you'll be tested. And if you respond negatively, like you panic and you short circuit, then they're gonna step off. They're not gonna come back again for a while. It might be a year, it might be 10 years, it might be 4 days, okay? But they're gonna try to approach you because you've made this desire to communicate with them. So you can't have your nervous system and be so disassociated and out of body that you can't handle these things, right? So you will experience ghosts, okay? You'll see auras around people eventually. You'll see light. You'll just look at someone, if you develop, you'll see people's auras. You'll see elementals. You'll begin to see potentially elemental beings, hear voices, angels, demons. You're going to feel things. All of that stuff is going to start happening, and it's going to challenge your reality. And it's not going to happen when you want it to happen, how you want it. It's going to happen according to a lot of laws and mysteries that you may not even understand. Heck, I still don't even understand. 90% of the stuff I see, I don't understand. Literally, there is so much stuff that I just see, and I'm like, okay, all right, I don't get that, So a lot of the stuff you experience, you may not be able to fully grasp and explain and give a lecture on or know. It's very, very humbling. But the more you go, you can maybe explain part of it to yourself to the point that you're comfortable. But just because you're an intuitive doesn't mean that you know every mystery of the world and every circumstance, whatever. It's a very humbling experience, because the more psychic you become, the more you realize that you don't really know anything, and that it's actually not really about knowing. Knowing is more about control. That what the spiritual world is really looking to bring about in us is a specific state of being. It's a specific state of being with them. And then when we need to know something, it will come into our mind. So it is a different way in existing in the material world when we think we have to cram all of this knowledge in our brain and that's intelligence. No, actually, no. Memorization and recall is actually not intelligence. Intelligence is linking up your mind with God's mind and the spiritual hierarchies and having that be your organ. Okay, so that's what real intelligence is in the truest sense of the word. So your world will change and you're going to see things, and that's where a lot of people will sometimes back out. They're like, nope, didn't think it was going to be like that. And then they don't walk that path. But a lot of people, they go through it and they become curious. They're curious what that elemental was, on the side of the road, or they're curious as to why they saw that ghost, or they're curious as to why they're suddenly feeling everyone else's emotions. And so you know that you're ready to go to the next level when the spiritual activity increases around you and it makes you interested. It makes you want to know more. You can sense behind all of it that you're going to evolve through understanding this. And that means you're ready. So the spiritual world will absolutely, it's like a test. They're going to test to see if you can actually start making that bridge, or if it's just like a funny hobby you want to do, or if it's just something you're thinking about. And that'll be discovered real quick when things start to appear and you start to have a little inkling of these abilities. It's very obvious whether or not this is a serious pursuit. Like, I've heard people who will find out what I do or whatever, someone I don't really know, and then they'll tell me a story of basically a kind of psychic lucidity happens to them. They see an angel, they have a strange dream that very obviously to me is an opportunity to enter into the spiritual world deeper. And they're just like, nope. And that was the time when I shut myself down completely, because what the heck was that? And so there is that point where even if you're not like declaring you want to enter spiritual service, spiritual beings are still going to try to raise you. And a lot of people are just like, all the nopes. I'm not in control of this. A lot of people need to be in 100% control, or feel like they have 100% control over their environment, over their life. This kind of work is not for you because you will stop feeling that 100. You will stop feeling that, and you will realize that you are part of something much greater than you could even comprehend to control. You start realizing that you are part of the spiritual hierarchies. You're part of angels. You're part of God. You're part of this world movement. And you seek more and more to just be useful in that, whatever that may be, because the cause is so great. So that is a totally different position than a control position that's like, I don't want to see anything out of my purview because I need to feel in control in order to exist. So that is not a position of spiritual growth. And there are many people that operate like that, but somebody who is wanting to work from a spiritual place, you're the opposite of that. You have to enjoy these encounters. You have to surrender yourself to visions that you don't understand, that you may not ever understand. A lot of the time I'll give readings for other people and forget them in 5 minutes, and I don't even understand them. So you are a vehicle, and it is a great gift to the world, and it is a great gift to yourself to operate in the way it takes to really do this. But you've got to have that humble surrender as well, because you, over time, more and more, the spiritual world will enmesh with your physical world. And the more it does, the deeper you're going into yourself. Because from a cosmological standpoint, every single spiritual plane is right here. It's not out in the cosmos. It is here. Everything is right here. And the difference between you and an angel is not even vibrational frequency. It is a quality of being. The different planes are different qualities of consciousness or different levels of initiation. It's not matter vibrating faster or slower. It's actual, they're different qualities of spirit, right? But it's all here. It's all happening right here. So when that veil does begin to thin, it means that you're progressing, right? Now, that said, you're not completely helpless. It's not like you're going to go into an insane asylum, or it's not like you have no command of your life anymore. You do. And you learn that too. You learn that the different moods that you have, you learn that the more embodied you are, the more sort of control you have over what you experience. The more disembodied you are, the less control you have, the less, I don't know if control is the right word, but the more embodied you are, the more distance there is between you and the spiritual world. And you see things for what they are more clearly. There's less surprises. You just kind of look over and you see something and you know what it is on a deep level. Whereas if you're disembodied all the time, that's when you can become afraid of things, because you need embodiment for discernment. You cannot discern anything in the spiritual world without being embodied, without being deeply, deeply rooted in your body. Most psychics' technique is actually not that. It's actually complete disassociation, where they merge with the spiritual world, but then they don't have that precision that comes from embodiment, right? So there's also different techniques to be psychic. They're not all the same. There's better techniques than others, right? There's some techniques I wouldn't even touch with a 10-foot pole. Okay. So you learn to navigate it. You learn to integrate. You learn to navigate the spiritual world. You learn to integrate it, but you don't ever fully turn it off. Your angels, however, are always working with you. So they will, it's not like willy-nilly, you're just out here like seeing everything spiritual. Like, your angels are, a lot of that is passing through them first. They experience it with you. So when things happen, it's happening with you and your angel. So a lot of things every single day are rebuffed by your angel. There's all sorts of things that could happen. There's all sorts of trouble that you could be getting in, but it is prevented from happening because of your angel and their protective force over your life. So it's not like chaos. Everything has meaning and a reason, and it is going through your angel as well. So keep that in mind. So you're not alone in this. But you do have to change your life to accommodate this kind of anchoring from the spiritual world. And it's not all shock and awe. You also will have, the deeper you go into this as well, you will also have the most profound and deep understandings about who you truly are. That feeling, that emptiness that we try to fill through food or scrolling on the internet or whatever it is, addictions. When you can enter into this life properly, you start to draw yourself closer to God, and that hole becomes filled. So it's our conscious relationship with God and the spiritual world that fills that hole. So if we live a life where we're refusing to step into that relationship, then we will eternally crave it. But the mystic is developing that relationship all the time. And so while you may have some weird experiences, the upside is you're going to meet your true self. You're going to really feel who you truly are, because who you truly are lies in your higher self in a spiritual form, and it's being sort of regulated down to you. So you get to experience that. You get to experience your higher self, your true ego, consciously. So you get to figure out who you really truly are. You get to separate out and heal all of these parts of yourself. You have to do that with spirit. So there's more benefits to this than there are downsides. Like, so what if you see like a weird entity in the corner at night? I mean, at the end of the day, you still have to pay your rent. You still have to buy groceries, even if that weird thing is like in the corner. I mean, okay, hey, I still have to, write tomorrow. You learn, you may experience these weird things, but you still have to live your life. And that's part of dealing with the dark side too. But while we're on the topic, it is true that when you start anchoring into the spiritual world and living from that, working from that, you're like in a different league now. Now you are consciously working with your angel, you're taking on service in the world. Now there can be more psychic attacks. You can experience these incredible delays in your life, and you're like, excuse me, I am taking on a role of service, and I should be supported with that. But what really happens is you're a threat. Okay, by you saying, I'm going to take a role of spiritual service in this world through my lawyership, through my doctor's practice, as a mystic directly, whatever that is, you are a threat to the demonic kingdom, who thinks that every single person here should be their lunch. You're taking the lunch out of their mouth, potentially. You're out here working from a spiritual place. You're waking people up. You're initiating people with your energy. You're out here, with Christ's energy through you. I mean, not your energy. And now it's like the demonic plane is like, who is this? Who does this person think they are? They're taking away our power. And so even if you don't think that you're like some big deal or whatever, even in your life, like the way that you talk to your friends, you're that friend that is the counselor, the way that you're showing up for basic things in your life is a threat to the demonic realm, because they don't want you to wake up, and they don't want your good influence to wake up other people either. They don't want your service. They want you asleep and everybody else asleep. So even if you've never spoken a peep out into the world and said, I'm going to, start taking clients as a psychic, or I'm going to open this like intuitive psychology practice or this intuitive medicine practice. You may not have like breathed a word of it to the world. You could experience crazy delays. You could experience psychic attacks. You could experience technological glitches. You could experience people turning on you all of a sudden, weird kinds of attacks, problems with your home, problems with your vehicle. Not that you should be paranoid that everything that happens is an attack on you. That's not healthy either. But you do have to factor in that when you start operating from that level of service, yeah, there's going to potentially be psychic attacks, even if you've never told anyone. And then if you do start actually making a big effect, you can go through periods in your life that are actually heavier than they should be normally because of psychic attack. So you actually have to factor in that there objectively exists a lower plane that is full of lower entities, classically called demonic beings. These entities do not want you to bring light to the world. They don't. So all they see is you lighting up and you having this wonderful effect, and they want to make you think that you're not doing a good job. They want to make you think that you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, because they want homeostasis and you're rocking the boat. So you have to consider that. Don't let, while you're entering into your service, do not let that flat tire, that technological glitch, that bout of depression, that health condition stop you from being who you truly are. Understand that you're rocking the boat. Understand that you're doing something. Even if you don't see the results, they're there. Remember, running marathons in the spiritual world, while nothing is necessarily happening here, that's completely part of spiritual service. Is huge stuff is going on in the spiritual world, but it doesn't manifest in the material world until it's time. So you've got to know that dynamic. That's going to keep you focused, and it's not meant to frighten you. We don't talk about the demonic plane to frighten or to bring fear. If you think that, you're not ready for this. We talk about the demonic plane because it objectively exists, and if you're going to work in the spiritual field, you're going to need to know everything you can about it, because that's how you protect yourself and your clients and everything from being exposed to that. Ignorance is not for the mystic. It's not for someone in this position. That's the worst thing you can have. It's like Ephesians and the constant battle that's going on in the spiritual realm. When you step into your spiritual power, you begin being part of that. You become a player in that directly, instead of being someone that's just on the receiving end of the different currents and just so focused on like getting things or something. Now you're actually upright and you're participating in the battle in the spiritual world. You are in it now directly. And that's what these entities do not want. So you will be walking between worlds. You will be someone who walks between worlds. And I think there's a First Nation saying that's really beautiful about the shamans and they're two worlders or two world walkers. That's what you're going to be. That's what you're going to be if you accept this covenant of service. And again, the more that you objectively know, the more that you study, the more that you understand, the easier it becomes. But you will also experience loneliness. You'll also experience loneliness because you are walking in two worlds, and there's going to be experiences that you have that no matter how much someone loves you, no matter how much they want to understand, they're not going to understand. They're not going to see what you saw. They're not going to have the experience that you had. It's completely intangible to them. And so there's going to be an incredible loneliness, potentially, if you choose to walk this path. Because you're going to encounter things that the English language doesn't even have great words to describe. It doesn't even have, that's one of the things about the spiritual field, is the language is not great. It's difficult to describe even sometimes basic spiritual things. And you may experience things that are incredibly emotional to you, psychologically disturbing. And because it's happened within you, and it's so deeply personal, and it has happened in the spiritual world, and involves the spiritual world, there may not be very many people, if at all, that you can talk about that with. So a lot of people pump the brakes and they don't operate from the spiritual place because they're not ready to deal with the loneliness that comes with being in this field. Okay, now that's why it also helps to have a community, right? Even if it's an online community, that's why I started mine, is that it can help to have like-minded people who are working from that place, who you can discuss things with And that allows you to depressurize your marriage, your friendships, your family relationships, because at least you have an outlet. So find some community, locally or online. It doesn't have to be mine, but find a community that you resonate with so that you have this depressurization of the loneliness and you can talk about things. And no, someone in the community may not understand it exactly, but chances are when you're talking to other mystics and other people on this path, they may have a lot similar, sometimes identical experiences. And that is really important, is that you don't want to feel like you're alone, because that can intensify things even more. But when sometimes the more alone that you feel, it's weird, you realize that you are loved unconditionally by God. So when I look at my own personal life, loneliness and being alone was a major theme. Like no matter what I did, there was always this sort of solitary aspect or reclusive aspect. And it was incredibly difficult for me, especially in my younger years. But what I realized in that was that I truly discovered who I was. And those discoveries were something that no one could take away from me. And I truly began to feel the unconditional love of God as well. Because there was this loneliness, because there was this solitude that oftentimes seemed enforced on me. When I really look at how the loneliness affected me, I don't think I would be able to do what I'm doing today unless I experienced it. So at the same time, when you are on a spiritual path, having that reclusive aspect, having that loneliness, having that separateness even, can be exactly what you need to be comfortable with yourself, to not feel like you need to be accepted by the crowd. That there's an incredible power to not really caring what people think, right? That's where you really get to be who you are. How many times do you stop exploring yourself and your own mind and your ideas because you're worried your friend is going to abandon you, or your family is going to abandon you, or you're just not going to be accepted? Well, you have to live out who you truly are no matter what, and you have to have the strength to do that. And that's what this world, this world of spiritual service requires. So it is good to have some kind of community to let the steam off and learn about your experiences and have that warm glow of community, which is going to be that softness that you need, that allows the depth, because too much loneliness is like cold steel and it's not good. But you need to be able to be alone. You need to be able to be alone. If you're not able to be alone, then you're not going to form your own opinions. And if you can't have your own mind, if you're not an individual, then you're not going to really be able to communicate with spirit properly. You have to have that developed. So loneliness is part of this from many levels. And you have to be able to navigate that. Part of it is just ostracization in your life because you're different, or because you're, having these experiences that change you. But you have to do the best you can with it to strengthen, to be upright, to be an individual, and then enter back into the world as that person, including having a community where you can better yourself through. So this is a very important dynamic for you when you're coming from that spiritual place. And I also want to say that mystics are the future. People who are working from a spiritual place, that is the future way in which humanity will operate. Where we are now, I mean, we're not even at zero right now when it comes to spirituality. We're not even at zero. We're at a negative. When we look out into the spiritual world, it would be great to just be at zero neutrality. We're at a negative because we're actually having to deal through wrong conceptions, through inversion after inversion after inversion. That's a negative. We actually have to work hard as spiritual people to just get to neutrality, to get back to neutrality. So we're not at neutral, we're actually in an inversion. And we need people from every walk of life, every profession, to be working from a spiritual place to bring that forward, because that is the future. Just because you don't acknowledge the spiritual world exists, because it doesn't reveal itself to you, or whatever egoic concept you require to believe in the spiritual world, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It objectively exists. And we are connecting with it right now. A portion of us is being dissolved into it right now and reborn. So it is every person's task, every person's duty to begin to do that consciously. That's mysticism. Every person is a mystic. Every person is psychic, and every person is spiritual. And it is our task moving into the future to become conscious of this, to become conscious participants in this, to become conscious participants in our own spiritual development, in our own life. There is no evolution in life without spirit. There is no healing in life without spirit. Spirit is God. Nothing moves, nothing goes without life, without the Christ, without spirit, nothing. So let us enter into, therefore, everything through spirit. If it is required, then let us be that. Let us be conscious of that. And that is where we are going in the future. And whomever chooses this path will be of the future, will be the trailblazers. They will be on track. They will have the vision, and they will be the true pioneers. The pioneers going into the next 1,000 years will not be the materialists. They will not be the people creating new, weird scientific language for things that already exist in the spiritual disciplines. They're not going to be the scientific priests that are the materialists and all that. No, we will look back at that and be embarrassed about it. The real future lies in having this living view of the world, and by approaching everything from the knowledge and workings of spirit. And that is all of our tasks. Again, no matter whether you are directly teaching as a spiritual teaching and a mystic and you're in that directly, or whether you operate whatever career you have from spirit, it's the same thing, it's the same process, it's the same necessities. Mystics are the future. How the mystic lives is eventually how all people will live. Psychic abilities are natural, and all people are tasked to develop them and a relationship with their angel. It is a way of being that all humanity must develop. And the dogmatism is not just, it's not just for the, people in the scientific fields. I'm talking also to different people that are in the different religions. That dogmatic stuff isn't good either. It has to be a living system, a living acknowledgement. It can't be dogmatic in religion, and it can't be dogmatic in science. That's where death is. So, when you enter into a covenant of psychic service, you open your life up to living partly in the material world and partly in the spiritual world. You will open to many kinds of spiritual experiences at any time, in any place. You could be, I can't tell you how many times I will be in the car and I'll just see a ghost on the side of the road and be pulled into the spiritual world, or people walking around the house that I live in, angels, auras, it's any time, it's all the time. You're operating on a different level. Okay. You will be open to many kinds of experiences at any time, at any place, and will be tasked to make sense of them and integrate them in a healthy, productive way. So the more that you live, you can't just be super concerned about your material life. Because when you're operating from spirit, like that mindset doesn't even make sense anymore, right? You will experience both light and dark beings and have to learn discernment. So the only way that any person is going to learn the discernment between an angel and a demon, a good entity and a bad entity, is through literally experiencing them. You can take as many classes as you want on spiritual beings and the spiritual planes, and that's great actually. The more knowledge you have, the better. But when it comes down to you actually being able to discern a demonic entity from a positive spiritual entity, that's going to come down to a process within you. You have to experience it. There's no avoiding having encounters with dark entities. You're already having them. Everybody does all the time. They're around us just like angels are. So you have to experience these things in order to recognize them, to build a rapport with what that is, and then eventually overcome it. Overcoming the dark side, overcoming demonic entities, overcoming death is part of our mission. You cannot hide from that. So if you're watching this and you think that you're going to become a master psychic, a master spiritual person, and somehow avoid looking into the darkness of the spirit of the dark side, never looking at a demon, never having a nightmare, you are mistaken. It is unavoidable. You will see that stuff. So you have to educate yourself and be prepared for it, and just know that that's part of it, but it's not something that's going to like take over necessarily or anything like that. It's actually your ignorance of it is what makes you vulnerable to having these unconscious possessions and stuff like that. It's actually your fear of it and your ignorance of it, and you're not wanting to know about it, that feeds that stuff. Turn the lights way on. You are a child of God. Okay? You can endure anything. Yes, certain things will shock you. I have had experiences that would curl your toes. Okay, I have been through the ringer with some things in my life, periods of my life. And we'll get into that in the course too. I will share these experiences. But that's part of it. You can't even ride a bus without having someone on there that's probably negatively oriented. You can't go to a shopping mall, a concert, without being surrounded by dark people. We think that we're going to be spiritual in the spiritual world and not encounter that. You've got to know that you will, but you've got to know that you are strong enough to look right at that and say, you will take nothing from me. You may shock me. This may be shocking, but you will take nothing from me. So it's only through confronting the darkness that appears before you that you overcome it. This is facing the dweller at the threshold. This is the common initiation. So there is no spiritual service, there is no spiritual perception without confronting the shadows, without confronting entities, without confronting your own shadow, which is the reason why these entities can appear anyway. That's part of it. And, I will not pretend like it's not, but what I will teach is how to get through that and as much knowledge as you possibly can to navigate that properly. And so you're not alone in that. That's the best thing we can do. But you will experience that. And you will also experience incredible beauty. You will also experience heaven. You will also experience angels. You will also experience the most beautiful sensations and information and knowledge that you couldn't even, it's so incredible you wouldn't even think to ask for it. This is what the work is. It is both of these things. And through experiencing them, you learn to get through the dark, faster. And it starts to have less of a control over you. You learn how to be in this. You learn discernment, but you have to be in it. Okay, you have to be in it. You cannot fully shut off your abilities, but you can learn to manage them and create a life in which they find a high outlet in genuine service, which is also the best protection. So your attunement, how you attune, and like the member said, how she does devotionals every day. She has a system. He or she that is doing this work, that is a member, does devotionals every day. This person is attuning themselves every day. This is a working psychic that just spoke up. This person is attuning themselves every day, which is giving them the kind of perspective they need to work and operate in this world. So when you have that attunement and you work on it, that is your best protection. And when you are tuned well, dark entities are not nearly as scary as they are when you suffer from disassociation. It's a totally different experience of them. I mean, I'm not going to get into it. I don't want to get tangential on dark entity experiences, but we'll get into that when we do more psychic protection, and we'll have classes where we just go into it. But I'd love to know your stories too. Maybe we'll do some readings. Maybe that'd be fun, is to read some of your stories. Anyway. How you use your gifts and how you attune yourself is the best psychic protection. You can establish boundaries, good habits, and a good routine, but this work becomes your life. It is not part-time. It cannot be completely controlled, and your life becomes part of a mission for God. Your life must become greater than yourself and your lower ego's desires. So your life over time, your lower ego and your lower self gets ground away, and you live to be in service to God, and you become a vehicle for Him. And at first it's very scary because you're often led into you feel like these paths and these moves in life that are what am I doing? This doesn't make any sense to me. But then you're I have to take a risk in the direction of my heart because I feel like this is what God is saying, and you have to do it. And at first, the first 50 times, I don't know, may feel absolutely terrifying to you. It may feel like this is the opposite thing you can do. But what's really happened is that you've been raised in this materialistic society, and we're so hyper-focused on money, and you have to get this in order to be happy, and you have to have this relationship, and you have to do this. And so we have this weird picture materialistically about what success is and what it should be, and it's a lie. And so we have to then grind down that lie, and over time start to detach from that, dissolve it, and actually operate from our heart, from God, which is a totally different life that's born from us. And the weird thing is, it actually is a better life than you could imagine, but you couldn't imagine it because you were too materially focused and you were using material markers for your success, when the material world will never fill the hole in your heart that is God-shaped. It will never. The only real fulfilling thing in life is to connect with God consciously. That is your nourishment, that is your food. And there are processes and things in which we can do that, which is, classically mysticism. So your life becomes part of a mission for God. When you enter into your service, you're just not developing your own self. You're not just healing yourself. You're actually in service to God, and you're actually healing the world. You're actually contributing on levels of magnitude that you can't even comprehend. When you get in your rhythm, When you get in your vibe and you're connected with Christ and you're acting from that, you are operating on a much higher level than when you're materially focused and you're looking down here and you're just looking to gather as much stuff as you possibly can to then be happy. We all know that that doesn't make us happy. We all know that being in service is what makes us happy. We know that because that's also how we evolve, but we sometimes can't admit it because we're basically brainwashed into a completely inverted, negative way of being just by being here at this point. Not that the world is all bad, but we are in an inversion. We're in the Kali Yuga. So you'll be challenged to no longer act out your lower ego, but rather act from the highest place within you possible. You have to always ask yourself, what is my highest purpose? What is my highest activity? How can I become more moral here? How can I release more of my lower ego? And this is what makes you free. This is what makes you innocent, is that seeking that over anything else. That's what makes you wildly psychic and spiritual too. That's what brings that eternal sense of peace, is when you're no longer anchoring yourself in what is fleeting, what is the world of death, and you anchor it in the world of life, which is the world of spirit. Your psychic abilities are not an accessory to bring you fame or fortune, and if you treat them that way, you will succumb over time to incredible misery. Do not go into the psychic field, do not go into the spiritual field to think that you're going to be famous or think that you're going to get rich or you're going to be some big influencer and get sponsors. Do not do that. Do not say that you are going to be the spiritual person, the spiritual teacher, and then have your entire purpose really be to leverage your spiritual life to get something material. That is the biggest mistake that I think someone can make, because you will over time succumb to incredible misery. Now, I want to be very clear. That does not mean that you have to be like some poverty-ridden person who has no money, who has no status, or anything like that. The difference that I'm talking about is that's not why you do what you do. So you don't do spiritual work to become famous, to make tons of money. The reason why you're doing it isn't for that. The reason why you're doing it is because you love humanity and you love God and you love it. This is the way. And then whatever life God brings you through that is your life. It could be a life of wealth. It could be a life of status that emerges as a result of your work that has more to do with karma and forces that we don't understand. It may be a very humble life, but the point is not whether you have money or whether you don't have money, whether you have, status or whether you don't have status. The point is that you cannot obsess over it and leverage your spiritual abilities to get that. So if you see someone who is like a successful psychic or something, or you see somebody who is, doing something spiritual artist, spiritual psychologist, they're obviously very spiritually attuned. That doesn't mean that they're a bad person, right? It doesn't mean that someone who has wrote a popular book and is enjoying going on a book tour because they gave this to the world, that doesn't mean that they're a piece of crap. That's also not, psychics need to eat and pay their bills like everybody else. And so that is something that needs to be understood too. It's about where you're coming from. You can't come from a place of greed. Any leveraging of the spiritual self with the material self is always greed. You cannot come from greed. You have to come from sheer releasing of the material world, complete and total service, and then what emerges as your life emerges as your life. Does that make sense? That's the difference. Okay, let me pop into your comments. That is the final portion of our lecture today. Let me pop in. All right. This is from Windhammer 1237. Gigi is spilling the tea of wisdom. Yeah, that's the goal here. Joseph McKinnon. The lights in my head sometimes is so bright, but I never understand it, but observe it. Yeah, that's initially how spirit can begin to communicate, or when it's interfacing, when you're starting to connect, you can get these different sensations in the body too. Like for some people, it's not just like lights appearing. It's like the different sensations can appear on the body, because some people are just, everybody has a different kind of psychic ability. In psychic development, this is called unfoldment. So not everybody rekindles and awakens the same. So this is also very important, especially like when teaching, is everybody is coming at it from a different place. So yeah, the most important thing is that you just kind of relax into your gifts and you stay very embodied. And that's very key. Michael Adkins, open-minded professions, dentists especially, psychologists, doctors, politicians would be brilliant. I mean, think about this. Think about politicians that actually were driven by by a higher spiritual understanding, and we're not just completely controlled by lower impulses and urges. And that's actually what it takes is, I don't want to get too deep into it, but it takes people that love the world and love humanity and want something greater for them almost more than they love themselves. There is a certain kind of person that changes the world, period. And it's not the person that's worried about having 7 figures in their bank account. Generally. That's all they're focused on. It's not the person that's just focused completely on the material world. It's someone who has a different orientation that tends to change the world in a positive way. Dagda Maddock. I'm not a professional psychic, just a hillbilly guitar picker and singer. However, the process being described here works for me too. One thing is just like another thing. Actually, well, music is a form of art, and every song that hits you came from the spiritual world as an impulse. So music is incredibly connected to spirituality. I think that poets, musicians, artists is just another form of spiritual work. It's just you're working through the medium of the guitar. You're working through the paintbrush. You're working through dance. You're working through your medium, but it's coming from a spiritual place, right? Doyle Wayne, dream work with a journal. Dream work is huge because it's in our dreams that we actually see what's going on in our subconscious mind. Unleash soul. I want to get into psychic development once I fully heal. The detoxification and regeneration process increases your level of self-awareness by a lot. Yes, 100%. The principle and law of magnification. Joseph McKinnon. I'm so excited to find more depth. I'm so glad. I had originally planned on doing this last year, but then we got so uprooted that it's happening now. Oblivi 8. If you're not positively attuned, eventually you would lose yourself and would lead to ruin, a la Crowley. Yes, exactly. So Crowley is a controversial figure because he tended to ultimately anchor his occultism around himself and the material world. And, when he passed away, he was heavily addicted to substances, and the people who were with him in his final years say he was completely alone, disassociated, and was living a life of basically being pushed aside. So you have to keep that in mind. And there's many such figures that, you know, are not properly attuning themselves, and then near the end of their life, it's like they experience all of this ruin. And it's not even just occultists, it's lots of different people. You can see this in people's lives that as they get older, there's suddenly, you start to see that this person has not spent the bulk of their life working on themselves. You know, in psychic development, we say you're not attuning yourself properly, but it's also like you're just not developing yourself. And if you're not growing, you're dying. And so this also happens with people as they get older too. For someone who has not been working on themselves, you know, it's like they degenerate more. It's like they can have more difficulty as they get older. The personality can collapse because they haven't spent their life developing it, right? And it's not that these people should be like, you know, like pushed aside or something. It's just we actually need to talk about what creates healing, what creates evolution of the consciousness, and what good attunement is and what bad attunement is. A lot of people just have no idea, right? And so that's why the information is important. Sacred blood alchemy. I never asked to be an empath, but I am in a big way. Always picking up on other people's energies. It's draining. It is draining. The thing about being clairsentient and being an empath is that so many people don't know they are one. And it's so good, Sacred Blood Alchemy, that you can recognize that you are that. Because I've known so many people in my life that have like autoimmune issues, that have actual physical issues that are related to them being an empath and quite literally taking on other people's stuff and the world stuff, and it's completely overwhelming for them. Anxiety disorders, depression, not being able to find that homeostasis because you're literally carrying so much stuff that it collapses the person. And all of our psychic abilities, by the way, are things that we've had in other lives. They're things that you've earned. If you are an empath and you have that permeability to feel what other people feel, whoa, that is a gift. The reason why we haven't absolutely destroyed each other as a species is because of empaths. Because they don't really see the difference between themselves and other people. So being an empath is an incredible gift. It is an incredible talent for intercommunity activities, for leadership. I don't personally want a leader that's not an empath. I don't care. I don't want a leader that cannot feel what other people are feeling to some degree. Empath is incredible for all different kinds of careers, for medicine. You know, when you have a doctor or someone that has that ability, they're going to give you better care. They're going to give you better service. So, you know, if you have an investigator, you have a cop, you have a detective. If that detective has clairvoyance, imagine how good he's going to be at being a detective. You see how these spiritual gifts that everybody has to a degree can amplify whatever career you're in. Everybody can benefit from developing these abilities. They make you sharper. They make you see a greater spectrum of life than you normally do. They make you better at what you do. They make you a better musician because you can feel everything deeper, because you're getting downloads of information and inspiration. This is when we become superhuman, no matter the field. It is our intuition and our psychic abilities that make us superhuman, that make us be who we truly are meant to be. It's not just something that's out there for like weirdos and like robes and turbans and white robes. It's for everyone. It's for everyone, and it's everybody's task. Okay. Remember, I am thinking this might be the veil thinning at least. I have not done anything to develop this ability, but the shadows, orbs, and visions are increasing. Yes, so we do have to factor in that we are going through you go through certain even moon phases, certain cosmological alignments that thin and thicken the veil. This is why different occult events are on certain ceremonial dates and stuff like that. So we are also dealing with a veil that thins and thickens at different times. Technology can thin the veil. So not everything is necessarily because of you, right? But you're still going to want to focus on attunement, and it is still immersion in that world is 100% part of your development. So you actually could be developing, but even though you're not focusing on it, just you watching streams like this, just you reading spiritual books, just you being around spiritual people actually slowly raises you and opens you to the spiritual world. You may not be like on some regiment, like I have to do all this and stuff. It's actually, a lot of it is just who you're around can slowly raise you as well, which is beautiful, Soul good. No one prepares you for how truly lonely it can feel sometimes. 100%. Especially at the beginning of your journey, when you're having your spiritual awakening and you're figuring everything out, and it just feels impossible to share and truly portray what you're going through. And this only becomes augmented if your social circle or your family has no interest or no idea, and that's not even their fault, right? And it can be very isolating and very lonely. And it's like, that's the archetype too for the mystic, is there's always this hermit phase, and it's difficult. And it's true, no one can prepare you for the loneliness of discovering who you truly are, because what's really happening is we're moving out of sort of like the hive mind and being in social situations and situations in our life where we actually operate communally, like we depend on other people for energy. We depend on other people's approval for energy. And that's what our default will be unless we actually rise out of it and stop living in that psychic communal way where you need other people to approve of you. You won't go outside of the group. And you're just living emotionally, mentally, and psychically in this kind of communalism where you're not being who you truly are. And spiritual work will require you to choose your own development. And that period is so incredibly lonely because you're like detoxing, or your entire energy body is starting to operate in a different way. So it used to work through codependency with the world, with your family, with your friends. It'd be just the complete pressure system of codependency, sharing energy. But then when you start to step out of that, your whole energy body is basically being rewired to be an individual. And where you were codependent, now you're operating succinctly with your angel and God. And that is your main focus. It's not secondary anymore. It is your main focus. Your main focus is your purpose, your service, and your spiritual growth and being who you truly are. That's different. That means your energy is running in a completely different way than when you're at the phase of being totally codependent on everyone in your life. Now, some codependency is normal, it's fine. But when you don't step out and individuate and become your own person, you're not operating as you should be energetically. And so that phase of weaning off of that, needing approval, needing the group, needing social situations and stuff all the time, that is lonely. But that's where you discover who you really are. And that's when your energy body actually re-engineers itself to not be getting energy from other people and be in this sort of communalness. And you start to get into that succinct connection with your angel and God, and you start operating on a completely different way. And that's power. And then through that, you find your new community, your new family, your new people in your life. that are also going through that process, and then you can come back into wherever you want because you have this confidence in who you are. And that's the process that we all have to go through to be spiritual, right? So once we know it and we know that's what we're going through, it's easier. But at the time when you experience it, it is devastating. It feels like a death because it really is the death of the old you and the birth of the new you, and you have no idea if the new you is even the right thing to do. That is that terror and pain of becoming who you really are. But that's necessary. That's what strengthens you. That's what gives you confidence. That period is necessary, right? Boho Warrior Yoga. Everyone around me always thought I was the strange one. Now meeting others who understand, I see we are the ones that are sane. 100. Yes. Yes. There's nothing like having that friend or finally finding people, or even just when you get to like a comfortable place where you're comfortable in your own bones. It's like you realize, like, wow, I really don't like what's popular. I'm not interested in what is mainstream, what everyone else is interested in. I'm interested in what's true and what's real. And there is a repulsion towards anything that's untrue, whether it be untrue because it's a genuine lie or it's untrue because it causes death in your body. There's so much stuff that's totally popular that will bring about death in your body, meaning that it has no nutrition in it. It has no life in it. It's not created from a holy place. And the more that you evolve, the more you see that. It's like the glow wears off. And that's also the gift of this is like, yeah, you begin to see what is the lie. And it's weird when you think about like, wow, like 10 or 15 years, I would have been so like engrossed in that. I would have like enjoyed that. I would have tried to be like that because I thought that was what to do. But yeah, it's like eventually you realize that no, the more spiritually aware you are, the more spiritually connected you are the sane person, and the world is crazy because there is objective truth and there's an objective way of being. So like, look at the political system right now. Okay, we're going to be in for like a big shuffle because, different individuals can operate from a lie and they can say, I have the highest office in the land. I have the truth. I'm going to do a UFO op. I'm going to do whatever it is. And they can do that for a period of time. However, it is law that in order to hold certain stations, in order for things to continue, they have to produce life. They have to produce life. There has to be some production of life through activity that is holy and that is spiritual, because light and dark both exist. So we are going to see big shuffles in politics and in the world, especially in the next, I would say, 5 years, because eventually there have to be people that are producing truth, producing life. That's how the cosmos exists. Both have to be there. So you actually have to produce something. You actually have to produce something of value to hold certain spaces long term. So this is just balance. It's just homeostasis, right? Lisa Davy, Gigi, preach it. This is our Sunday session. By the way, I also do this every other Sunday. So if you enjoy this, I do live Q&As with my group on my private website where we go for 4 hours, sometimes 3 hours, and I just take questions and we just hang out like this. The questions can be spiritual, world stuff, whatever it is. There's hundreds of hours of those that you can look at now on my membership. And that also allows me to do this public work. So I don't take any sponsors I'm not going to sell you anything during these lectures and talks, but when people support me on my website or purchase courses or whatever it is, that's what allows me to come out here and do this free work in the public. So I'm totally viewer dependent. It's all about you. All right. Grazia VL. Amazing lecture. I bow in gratitude. You have my absolute love and gratitude. And final comment, Erin Diane. Every TikTok kid mystic needs this lecture. 100%. I really hope that it's valuable. I really hope that you guys can resonate with this and find value. We are in a spiritual crisis, as Erin Danny is saying. You know, I have never seen, you know, the spiritual world be confused and distorted and so many bizarre spiritual paths emerge as I have now. And it's never been more important to have this real perspective of connecting with spirit and what it is. You know, we have different people massively who will not admit or do not recognize that the spiritual world is actually a world of beings. They don't think that Antichrist is a being. They think it's like your shadow self or energy. There's bizarre cosmologies emerging around natural science that are completely astroturfing the spiritual field with bizarre materialistic interpretations of things that are truncating real spiritual concepts and misinterpreting and mistranslating and not correctly referencing esoteric history and ancient history. We are in a time of peril, actually, when it comes to becoming spiritual. There's so many bizarre paths, and a lot of people are falling into them. They're incredibly popular. And so I really hope that this talk today has addressed some of those concerns. I do want to continue to do that. Definitely leave them in the comments section, what you feel like is a concern out there in the spiritual culture, and I will 100% speak more about that. Again, I will be doing my first class and really a series of class. It's kind of like back to school. We're going back to school for the fall, winter, and onward, and it's going to be spiritual development. It's going to be moving forward. There's going to be more scholarly courses in esoteric history, Atlantis, Lemuria, all this kind of stuff. But we're also going to have workshops like this where we directly talk about developing psychically and spiritually. And it's designed to give you all the tools and exercises and support that you need to feel confident developing these capacities. And so they're going to be rolled out over the years now. And I'm just incredibly excited to share it all with you and to be part of your journey if you will have me. And let me go ahead and read the super chats. I see that there are some. Thank you. Thank you, MKM Original, Dario, and Sky, and also Barn O'Berry Batsback. And Ricky Mitchell, thank you so much. I absolutely adore that. Thank you for the support. And I'm going to leave you with a clip, actually, because there is a 4-hour class that I taught a year ago, and it's called Esoteric Anatomy, the Four Bodies. And what that course describes is the four bodies of the human being. Now, this is foundational knowledge. You have to understand your four members, right? And the difference between the four bodies in the East and the four bodies in the West is the East is including the bodies transformed and not transformed. That's the difference for 7 versus the 4. Anyway, we'll get into that later. So the four bodies are the spiritual bodies that we actually use to operate, they exist objectively, and they make up our eternal body, our resurrection body, or our glorified body. So there's a distinct process of initiation that all humans are designed to go through and destined to go through, that involves the direct transformation of your spiritual bodies and your physical bodies. Now, this is called initiation science. So initiation science is when we in detail understand how we become eternal, okay, how we become immortal. And actually, in spirituality, eternality is not just given to us. Eternality happens when we're completely healed and whole and are like Christ. So there's a part of us that's a spark that is in the spiritual world, but we actually don't become eternal until all of these bodies are integrated, healed, and together as one. So there's a difference, especially in Christian esoterica, between eternality and just having a spark of consciousness that's completely fragmented and unintegrated. We incarnate into the physical life to integrate these spiritual bodies through Christ. So in that class, I describe exactly what these 4 bodies are and how they are transformed into an immortal body. And we also go into where the bodies come from, their creation, their planetary associations. It's a phenomenal class, and it's free with your membership. So when you sign up to be a member, you get that class with it. So if you are planning on taking this class with me in 2 weeks from today, I highly recommend taking the 4 bodies class, which is free with your membership first. That's going to give you the foundation. It's kind of like a prerequisite if you want to take the next class. You don't have to watch it, but that's going to give you the understanding of the 4 bodies and how they transform. Because if we don't understand our anatomy or esoteric anatomy, and we don't understand how we become eternal, then what is the point of anything? So that's the foundation, and that is there on my website for members. There's a couple clips of it also on my YouTube channel, if you want to check that out. So you guys, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been my absolute pleasure. I am going to leave you a little clip of the 4 bodies class if you want to take that. And I will see you very soon. Magnification.